There, look at his right hand. Zoom in. Nothing. It's 1995 and casino security is rewinding the same 30 seconds of footage for the 100th time. Sweat drips down the surveillance operator's forehead as he watches the pixelated image flicker on the screen. They've lost over $500,000 this month alone, and they know someone is bleeding them dry. Someone is cheating right under their noses, stealing from the most sophisticated security systems in the world. But the cameras show nothing. No sleight of hand, no chip switches, no evidence at all. 3 floors below, the man they're hunting sits calmly in a windowless back room, handcuffed to a metal chair bolted to the concrete floor. His name is Richard Marcus, though the casinos know him by a dozen other aliases. He's been here for 6 hours now. No water, no bathroom breaks, just the harsh, fluorescent lights and 2 Griffin investigators taking turns trying to break him. His face is neutral, his breathing is steady, his eyes are fixed on a point on the wall. He knows something they don't. They're looking at the wrong thing. They've always been looking at the wrong thing. And as long as they keep looking in the wrong direction, Richard Marcus will remain exactly what he's always been, invisible. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Richard Marcus was 21 years old when he arrived in Las Vegas with $30,000 in cash and a suitcase full of cheap suits that didn't quite fit. He'd won it all on a single trifecta bet at Santa Anita Racetrack in Los Angeles, picking 3 horses in exact order with odds so long the bookies had laughed when he placed the bet. But Marcus had a system, or at least he thought he did. He'd studied racing forms for months, tracking patterns, watching for trends. When those 3 horses crossed the finish line in perfect sequence, he was certain he'd cracked the code. He was certain he was special. He thought he was invincible. 6 days later, he was sleeping under a bridge. The money was gone. Every single dollar. He'd blown it at the craps tables first, convinced his winning streak would continue. Then the roulette wheels chasing losses with increasingly desperate bets. Finally, the blackjack pits, where he'd bet his last $500 on a single hand and lost. He didn't understand the odds. He didn't understand the house edge. He didn't understand that the casinos were designed, from the floor layout to the free drinks, to the absence of clocks, to separate fools from their money. He just understood, as dawn broke over the desert on his 7th day in Vegas, that he'd been chewed up and spit out like thousands of dreamers before him. For 3 weeks, he lived beneath that bridge on the outskirts of the Strip, where the glamour gave way to industrial warehouses and the shadows of abandoned buildings. He bathed in gas station bathrooms, splashing sink water under his arms and trying to keep his one remaining decent shirt clean. He ate from dumpsters behind casino buffets, timing his arrivals for just after closing, when the staff threw out hundreds of pounds of food. At night, he'd walk back toward the Strip and watch from a distance as the neon lights bled across the desert sky, the Stardust, the Desert Inn, Caesar's Palace, all those palaces of fortune that had destroyed him, and he'd wonder how he'd become so invisible. Then one morning, desperate and skeletal, having lost nearly 30 pounds, he walked into the Four Queens Casino on Fremont Street with his last clean shirt and a plan to lie his way into a job. The pit boss was a heavy-set man named Gino, with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen every con in the book. He looked Marcus up and down with obvious skepticism. "Ever dealt cards before?" Gino asked, his voice like gravel. 5 years, Marcus said without hesitation, meeting his eyes. "Reno, mostly blackjack, some roulette." He'd never dealt a single hand in his life, but desperation makes you convincing, and Marcus was desperate. His stomach was eating itself. His hands shook when he tried to hold them still. He needed this job or he'd die under that bridge. Maybe Gino saw something in him. Maybe they were short-staffed. Maybe he just didn't care. "You start tonight," Gino said. 6 to midnight. Minimum wage plus tips. You fuck up, you're gone. You steal, and you won't make it out of the building. Clear? Marcus nodded. They put him on a low-stakes blackjack table that evening, and he fumbled through it badly, learning as he went. His hands were clumsy at first, dropping cards, miscounting bets. But he watched the other dealers carefully, mimicking their movements, their patter, the way they handled chips with practiced efficiency. The tips that first night were enough to rent a weekly motel room in a part of town where prostitutes worked the parking lot and gunshots echoed after midnight. It wasn't much. The mattress sagged in the middle, and the shower only produced cold water. But it was better than the bridge. That's when he met the man who would change everything. His name was never spoken aloud. Everyone in the underground gambling world just called him Mr. C. He was in his 50s, sharply dressed in tailored suits that whispered money without shouting it. His hair was silver at the temples, and he had the kind of face that knew how to disappear in a crowd. Unremarkable features, no distinguishing scars or marks. The kind of face witnesses struggled to describe to police. He approached Marcus one night after his shift ended, sliding into the booth across from him at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the casino. Marcus was eating eggs and toast, his first real meal in days. "You're new," Mr. C said, stirring his coffee slowly, clockwise exactly 3 times. Marcus looked up, immediately wary. "In Vegas, strangers who approached you always wanted something." He nodded but said nothing. "And you're hungry." Mr. C smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Not for food, for something else. I can see it in the way you watch the tables, the way you count other people's chips. You're hungry for what they took from you." Marcus set down his fork. "Who are you?" "Someone who can teach you how to take it back," Mr. C said. "But you have to be smart. You have to be patient. And you have to trust me." "Why would I trust you?" "Because I've been watching you for 2 weeks," Mr. C said. "I know you're not really a dealer. I know you're living in that shithole motel on Paradise Road. I know you were sleeping under a bridge before that. And I know that right now, you're desperate enough to listen to what I'm about to say." Marcus felt his heart rate spike, but he kept his face neutral. "Which is, the casinos stole $30,000 from you. I can teach you how to steal it back. And then some." Marcus should have walked away. He should have finished his eggs, paid his bill, and gone back to his motel room. But desperation and curiosity are a dangerous combination. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "Right now? Nothing. I want you to keep dealing cards. Keep your head down. Build your cover. In 2 weeks, one of my associates will play at your table. You'll know him when you see him. Just deal the cards like normal, and watch what he does." "That's it?" "That's it," Mr. C said. He stood, dropped a $20 bill on the table for Marcus's meal, and walked out into the neon night. Marcus sat there for another hour, turning the conversation over in his mind. He knew it was probably a setup, a con within a con. Vegas was full of predators who fed on desperate people. But he also knew that Mr. C was right about one thing. He was desperate enough to listen. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday night when the casino was busy but not packed, Marcus was dealing blackjack at his usual table. It was around midnight when he saw the man. He was in his 30s, wearing an expensive suit and a Rolex that caught the light. He sat down at Marcus's table with a stack of $100 bills, buying in for $5,000. Marcus dealt the cards, watching carefully. The man played aggressively, betting high, losing some hands, winning others. He was good, not counting cards good, but good enough to keep the pit boss from paying too much attention. Then, on a hand where the man had bet $500, something happened. The man won. Blackjack, natural 21. Marcus went to pay him out at 3-2 odds, $750. But as Marcus's hands moved toward the chips, the man's right hand moved faster. It was so quick Marcus almost missed it. The stack of chips on the betting circle changed. One moment it was 5 $100 chips. The next moment it was 5 $500 chips. Same height, same stack, different value. And the man's hand was already back on the table, drumming fingers casually. Marcus felt his heart stop. He looked at the chips. He looked at the man. The man met his eyes with a calm, steady gaze that said, "Deal with it." Marcus glanced up at the camera dome above the table. From that angle, they wouldn't see the switch. The man's body had blocked the sight line perfectly. Marcus paid out at the higher rate, $3,750. The pit boss, standing 10 feet away, noticed nothing. The dealer next to Marcus noticed nothing. The other players noticed nothing. The man played for another 20 minutes, winning and losing in normal patterns, then colored up his chips and left. Marcus's shift ended an hour later. As he walked out through the employee entrance into the parking lot, Mr. C was waiting by a black Lincoln Continental. "Get in," Mr. C said. They drove to a warehouse district on the far edge of town. Inside a small office that smelled of cigarettes and old coffee, the man from the blackjack table was waiting. On the desk in front of him were stacks of cash. 21,000, the man said. "Not bad for 90 minutes of work." He counted out $3,000 and handed it to Marcus. Marcus stared at the money. More than he made in 2 months of dealing cards. "What was that?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. C lit a cigarette and smiled. "That," he said, "was late betting. And if you're smart, if you're patient, if you can keep your nerve, I can teach you how to make millions." Marcus looked at the cash in his hands. Then he looked up at Mr. C. "When do we start?" Over the next 6 months, Mr. C took Marcus under his wing like a dark mentor grooming an apprentice. They met 3 times a week in that warehouse office, and Mr. C taught him the fundamentals of casino cheating. Not the crude obvious stuff that got you dragged into back rooms and beaten by security goons. The elegant cons, the invisible thefts. The kind of operation that required intelligence, discipline, and absolute precision. Late betting was the cornerstone of everything. The principle was devastatingly simple. Place a bet after you already know the outcome of the event. In practice, it required 3 people working in perfect synchronization, nerves of steel, and years of practice to execute without detection. Mr. C broke it down like a military operation. 3 people, he said, moving sugar packets around the table to demonstrate. 2 players and a spotter. The spotter stands off to the side, never playing, just watching. Watching the table. Watching the dealer. Watching the pit boss. Watching the cameras. When the conditions are right, when the dealer is distracted, when the pit boss is on break, when the eye in the sky is focused on another table, the spotter gives a signal. "What kind of signal?" Marcus asked. "Anything. Touch your ear. Scratch your nose. Light a cigarette. Something subtle. Something that looks natural. Never the same signal twice in a row." Mr. C moved the sugar packets again. Player 1 is at the table. They've been playing for at least 30 minutes, building a pattern, establishing themselves as a legitimate gambler. When they get the signal from the spotter, they place a small bet. $25, $50, nothing that draws attention, low stakes, amateur numbers. And if they lose? If they lose, they do nothing. The money's gone. They continue playing. They wait for the next opportunity. Patience is everything in this game. You might wait all night for the right moment. You might wait 3 nights, but you wait. And if they win? Mr. C smiled. If they win, that's when the magic happens. The moment the outcome is clear, the ball settles in the roulette wheel, the cards are revealed at blackjack, the dice stop rolling. Player 1 switches the chip stack. Low-value chips are replaced with high-value chips. 500, 1,000, 5,000. It happens in a fraction of a second. Sleight of hand, misdirection, skills it takes years to perfect. He demonstrated with poker chips, his hands moving so fast Marcus could barely follow. The key is that the stacks look the same height, same number of chips. From above, from the camera angle, they're identical. The dealer doesn't notice because their attention is on 20 other things. The other players don't notice because they're focused on their own bets. And the pit boss doesn't notice because player 1 has been betting small all night. Then what? Then player 1 leaves the table immediately, within 30 seconds. They color up their chips if they have any left, or they just walk away. They're done. They never return to that casino for at least a month. And player 2? Player 2 has been waiting nearby. The moment player 1 leaves, player 2 steps in to take their exact position at the table. Same chair, same spot. And here's the crucial part. Player 2 sits down with a large visible stack of high-value chips. Purple 500s, yellow thousands, chips that scream high roller. Marcus was starting to see it. So when the dealer goes to pay out the bet, they see player 2 sitting there with thousands of dollars in chips. Mr. C finished. And when player 2 says, "Hey, you paid me wrong?" the dealer gets confused. They look at this person with $5,000 in chips in front of them. They look at the winning bet, and they think, Did this high roller really bet $25? That doesn't make sense. I must have made a mistake. But you're adding pressure too, Marcus said, understanding now. Multiple things happening at once. New person at the table. Complaint about payment. Stack of high-value chips. The dealer has to make a snap decision. Exactly. And under that pressure, surrounded by noise, distracted by 10 other players, in the pit boss asking them something, and the cocktail waitress bringing drinks, they make the wrong decision. They pay out at the higher value. By the time they realize their mistake, if they ever do, player 2 is long gone. It was brilliant, elegant, nearly invisible. How much can you make? Marcus asked. Mr. C stubbed out his cigarette. If you're good, if you're disciplined, millions. I've been running this game for 15 years and the casinos still haven't figured it out. They lose millions every year to late betting, and they don't even know it's happening. For the next 3 months, Marcus trained. He practiced chip switching for hours every day, using a roulette wheel Mr. C had set up in the warehouse. He'd place low-value chips, and in the split second after the ball landed, he'd swap them for high-value chips. Over and over, hundreds of times a day. His hands cramped. His fingers bled from handling the sharp-edged chips, but he got faster. Mr. C would suddenly shout, "Now!" and Marcus would have to make the switch in less than a second. If he took too long, if he fumbled, if the movement looked unnatural, Mr. C would make him start over. Again, Mr. C would say, "Smoother. Your hand moved like you were reaching for something. It needs to look like you're adjusting your bet, like you're pulling it back because you changed your mind. Natural movement. Again." They practiced at different speeds, different angles, with distractions. Mr. C would have someone come into the room and shout at Marcus while he was mid-switch, testing his ability to maintain composure under pressure. They practiced the player 2 role too, how to sit down confidently, how to place your chips on the table with the casual arrogance of someone who makes this bet every night, how to make eye contact with the dealer when you complain about being paid wrong. Not aggressive, not threatening, just confused and slightly annoyed, like a customer who's been given the wrong change at a restaurant. Never grab the dealer's hand, Mr. C warned him. Never raise your voice. You want them to feel bad for making a mistake, not threatened. You want them to want to fix it. Charm is better than intimidation every single time. Marcus practiced his facial expressions in a mirror, confused but polite, disappointed but understanding. The face of someone who's been inconvenienced but isn't going to make a big deal about it. By month 4, Mr. C decided he was ready. Tomorrow night, Mr. C said, Caesar's Palace. You'll be player 2. Bobby will make the switch. I'll be spotting. Don't fuck it up. Marcus didn't sleep that night. The Caesar's Palace casino floor on a Saturday night was a sensory assault. Hundreds of slot machines chiming and dinging in chaotic symphony. Cigarette smoke hanging in thick clouds beneath the ornate ceiling. Dealers calling out wins and losses in practiced voices. Cocktail waitresses in skimpy uniforms weaving through crowds of tourists and high rollers. Marcus walked in wearing a suit he'd bought at a thrift store and cleaned at a dry cleaner. It wasn't expensive, but it fit well enough. He looked like what he was supposed to be, a mid-level gambler with a few $1,000s to burn. He spotted Mr. C near the high-limit slots, reading a newspaper. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, then moved on. Bobby was already at a roulette table near the center of the floor, playing low-stakes bets and chatting with the dealer. Marcus positioned himself at a blackjack table 20 feet away, with clear sight lines to Bobby's roulette wheel. He bought in for $500 and started playing, forcing himself to focus on his own cards, even though his heart was hammering against his ribs. He lost 3 hands in a row, won 2, lost 1, normal patterns, building his cover. Then he saw Mr. C adjust his reading glasses. The signal. Marcus's attention snapped to Bobby's table. Bobby placed a small stack of chips on red, $25 chips. The dealer spun the wheel. The ball bounced and clattered around the track, seeming to take forever. Red 17. Winner. Bobby's hand moved. It was so fast Marcus almost missed it, and he was watching for it. One moment, there was a short stack of green chips. The next moment, there was a slightly taller stack of purple chips. $500 chips. Bobby stood up immediately, leaving the chips on the table, and walked toward the men's room. This was it. Marcus colored up his blackjack chips, taking his time, making it look casual. He walked toward Bobby's roulette table with a stack of purple $500 chips visible in his hand. His palms were sweating. His throat was dry. He sat down in Bobby's exact seat and set his stack of chips on the table in front of him with a little click of confidence. The dealer was already reaching for Bobby's winning bet. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice more nervous than he'd intended. "You paid me wrong." The dealer paused, confused. She was a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and dyed blonde hair. She looked at Marcus. She looked at the chips in front of him. She looked at the winning bet on red 17. "I paid $37.50, she said. "Right, but I had 500 on there, not 25, Marcus said. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears. "That should be 750. The dealer's face showed doubt. She glanced at the pit boss, but he was dealing with a complaint at another table. She looked back at Marcus's stack of $500 chips on the table in front of him. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," Marcus said, and in a move he immediately regretted, he reached out and touched her wrist. Not grabbing, just a light touch. "I had a purple chip on there." The dealer flinched slightly at the contact. Her face showed annoyance now, but she also looked uncertain. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm sorry. Let me fix that." She paid out the difference. $750 in chips instead of $37.50, a difference of $412.50. Marcus stayed for another 10 minutes, placing small bets, then colored up and left. He met Mr. C and Bobby in a parking garage 3 blocks away. "You touched her," Mr. C said immediately, his face dark with anger. "I told you never to touch them. You made yourself memorable. Memorable is how you get caught." "I know," Marcus said, his adrenaline still surging. "I fucked up. It won't happen again." "It better not," Mr. C said. Then his face softened slightly. "But otherwise you did good. The hesitation in your voice actually worked. She thought you were nervous about complaining, not nervous about cheating." They split the take 3 ways. Marcus walked away with $450 for 90 seconds of work. It was the most money he'd ever made in his life, and he wanted more. Over the next 3 years, from 1977 to 1980, Marcus became one of the best late bettors in Mr. C's organization. He learned to control his nervousness, to move with the casual confidence of someone who'd been gambling for years. He perfected his chip-switching technique until he could do it blindfolded. He learned to read dealers and pit bosses, identifying the weak ones, the tired ones, the ones who wouldn't question a payout. The team expanded. Mr. C recruited 6 other switchers and 4 spotters. They worked in rotating crews, hitting different casinos on different nights, never establishing a pattern. Marcus became player 2 exclusively. The closer, the one who had to sell the con with pure confidence and charm. They developed code words and signals. A spotter scratching their left ear meant abort. Right ear meant go. Lighting a cigarette meant pit boss is watching. Checking a watch meant cameras are focused elsewhere. They studied the casinos like intelligence operatives studying enemy territory. They learned which shift managers were hard asses and which ones were lazy. They memorized camera positions and blind spots. They tracked dealer rotations and break schedules. They even started bribing low-level employees. $100 to a valet to tell them when Griffin investigators were in the building. $200 to a cocktail waitress to spill a drink at the exact right moment. $500 to a maintenance worker to accidentally adjust a camera angle. By 1980, Mr. C's organization had stolen over $5 million from Las Vegas casinos. And then Griffin Investigations started paying attention. Griffin Investigations wasn't part of any police force. They didn't answer to judges or follow constitutional protections against illegal search and seizure. They were a private company hired by the casinos to do what law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't do. Identify cheaters, card counters, and con artists through any means necessary. Their headquarters in downtown Las Vegas housed the most sophisticated database of known cheaters in the world. Thousands of photographs, tens of thousands of case files. Detailed profiles on everyone from small-time chip thieves to international crime syndicates. They used facial recognition before it was common. They shared information across all the major casinos. They had informants in law enforcement, at airports, in hotel registries. And by 1982, they had Richard Marcus in their sights. It started with a pattern recognition analyst noticing something odd in the payout records from 3 different casinos. Small discrepancies. Dealers claiming they'd made mistakes paying out bets. Always roulette. Always during busy shifts. Always amounts between $500 and $2,000. Too small to trigger immediate investigation, but too frequent to be coincidence. Griffin sent undercover observers to watch the roulette tables. They filmed everyone who played. They cross-referenced faces against their database, and they found him, Richard Marcus, 27 years old, former dealer at the Four Queens, known associates with suspected advantage players, multiple sightings at casinos where payout discrepancies had occurred. They didn't have proof, but they had suspicion, and in the casino world, suspicion was enough. It happened on a Tuesday night at the Desert Inn. Marcus had just completed a successful switch, banking $1,500 in less than 2 minutes. He was walking toward the exit, feeling good, thinking about where the crew would celebrate tonight. Then 2 men in suits appeared on either side of him. "Mr. Marcus," one of them said quietly, "come with us, please." It wasn't a request. They walked him through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" and down a hallway that smelled of cleaning chemicals and cigarette smoke. They took him down a flight of stairs to a sub-level basement. The room they put him in had concrete walls, 1 metal table, 3 chairs, and a camera in the corner. The fluorescent lights were too bright. There were no windows. The handcuffs came out. "Is that necessary?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. They cuffed him to a metal ring bolted to the table without responding. Then they left him alone. He sat there for 40 minutes, his mind racing through scenarios. Did they have footage? Did someone talk? Did they catch Bobby or one of the spotters? When the door finally opened, 2 different men walked in. These ones weren't casino security. They had the bearing of former law enforcement. Hard eyes, patient expressions. Men who knew how to wait. "Mr. Marcus," the first one said, sitting down across from him. "I'm Agent Wilson with Griffin Investigations. This is Agent Reeves. We've been watching you for a while now." Marcus said nothing. "We know what you're doing," Wilson continued. "We've been documenting your activities at 7 different casinos over the past 6 months. We have footage. We have dealer testimonies. We have witnesses." Still, Marcus remained silent. "You're looking at serious felony charges," Reeves said. "Grand larceny, fraud, conspiracy. You could do 10 years in prison, maybe more. Nevada doesn't fuck around with casino cheaters." Marcus met their eyes but didn't speak. This went on for 6 hours. They tried every technique in the interrogation handbook. Good cop, bad cop, silence, aggression, false sympathy, claims they had evidence they didn't have, suggestions that his partners had already turned on him. "Bobby's already talking," Wilson said at one point. "Gave you up in about 30 seconds. Smart guy. He took a deal, but that deal's only available to the first person who cooperates." Marcus knew it was bullshit, but doubt wormed into his mind anyway. "Mr. C sold you out," Reeves tried. "Told us everything. Names, dates, techniques. You're the only one left holding the bag." Marcus stared at the wall and thought about that bridge he'd lived under 6 years ago. He thought about the nights he'd gone hungry. He thought about the casinos that had taken his $30,000 with predatory indifference. And he decided he wasn't going to say a single word. Finally, around 6 in the morning, Wilson threw his pen down in frustration. "Get him out of here," he said to Reeves. They uncuffed Marcus and escorted him back upstairs. At the employee exit, Wilson stopped him. "We know you're dirty," he said quietly. "We don't have enough to charge you yet, but we will. And when we do, you're done. Every casino in this city will have your face. Every gaming commission in the country will know your name. You'll never work in Vegas again." Marcus walked out into the desert dawn, his wrists aching from the handcuffs, his head pounding from lack of sleep. He knew Wilson was right about one thing. The game had changed. Marcus called an emergency meeting of the crew at the warehouse that afternoon. Bobby, Mr. C, and 4 other team members showed up looking worried. "Griffin has me," Marcus said without preamble. "They brought me in last night. 6-hour interrogation. They claim they have footage, witnesses, everything." Do they? Bobby asked. I don't think so, Marcus said. If they had real evidence, they'd have charged me. But they know something. They know enough to watch me, which means they're probably watching all of us. Mr. C lit a cigarette, thinking. We need to go dark, he said finally. No operations in Vegas for at least 6 months, maybe a year. Let the heat die down. Let them move on to other targets. What do we do in the meantime? One of the other switchers asked. We go international, Mr. C said, and that's exactly what they did. The Casino de Monte Carlo was everything Las Vegas wasn't. Old-world elegance instead of neon garishness. Tuxedos and evening gowns instead of shorts and tank tops. Champagne and caviar instead of free, watered-down cocktails. And most importantly, security that was 20 years behind the times. Marcus arrived in Monaco in the fall of 1983 with 2 suitcases, $50,000 in cash, and a French passport under the name Jean-Pierre Duchamp. The passport was a forgery, purchased from a Russian counterfeiter in Los Angeles for $10,000. It was good enough to fool border agents and hotel clerks. He checked into the Hotel de Paris using his fake identity and spent 2 weeks doing nothing but observing the casino. He watched the dealers, the pit bosses, the security procedures, the camera positions. What he discovered amazed him. The surveillance technology was primitive compared to Vegas. Fewer cameras, wider angles, more blind spots. The security staff was smaller and less trained. Many of the pit bosses were more focused on maintaining an atmosphere of refined elegance than actually watching for cheaters. It was perfect. Mr. C arrived a week later with Bobby and 2 other team members. They set up in separate hotels and began planning their moves with military precision. The first hit was conservative, a $2,000 switch at roulette. It went off perfectly. The European dealers were even easier to fool than the American ones, trained to provide service rather than security. They hit the casino 3 times that first week, stealing a total of $18,000. Then they started scaling up. By week 4, they were running $5,000 switches. By week 8, they'd moved up to $10,000. The casino security never caught on. Over 6 months in Monaco, the team stole $2.5 million. The Ritz Club in London was even more lucrative. Marcus arrived in the spring of 1984 with a new identity. Thomas Wellington, a textile manufacturer from Manchester. He dressed the part. Conservative suits, expensive but understated watch, the bearing of old money rather than new. The Ritz was smaller than Monte Carlo, more intimate, with higher stakes. The players were investment bankers, oil tycoons, minor royalty. These were people who thought nothing of losing 50,000 pounds in an evening. Marcus fit right in. He spent a month establishing himself as a regular, losing deliberately to build his cover. He tipped generously. He made small talk with the dealers about cricket and the weather. He became part of the furniture. Then the team arrived and they went to work. The Ritz job was different from Monte Carlo. The security was tighter, the staff more attentive, so they adapted their technique. Instead of switching chips after every few bets, they'd wait hours for the perfect moment. Instead of rotating through multiple casinos, they focused entirely on the Ritz, building trust through familiarity. And instead of small switches, they went for massive ones. The biggest single switch happened on a Saturday night in August. Marcus was playing roulette at the high roller table, where the minimum bet was 500 pounds. Bobby made a switch on a winning bet, replacing a 500-pound chip with a 5,000-pound chip, a 9,000-pound payout. Roughly $60,000 in 1984 money. The dealer never questioned it. Over 8 months at the Ritz, the team stole 300,000 pounds, equivalent to about $2 million. Macau in 1986 was the wild east of gambling. Portuguese colonial rule was loosening. Triad gangs controlled much of the illegal gambling operations. The legal casinos were barely regulated compared to Western standards. It should have been easy money. Instead, it became their first major warning that the game was changing. Marcus arrived in Macau with Bobby and Mr. C, using Singapore-based identities this time. They spent 2 weeks scouting the Lisboa Casino, the biggest gambling operation in the city. What they found was concerning. The security was chaotic and unpredictable, sometimes incredibly lax, sometimes paranoid and aggressive. The pit bosses all seemed to have connections to organized crime. Cameras were everywhere, but nobody seemed to be watching the footage. It was a mess. But there was clearly money to be made. They ran their first operation on a Thursday night. Marcus made a successful switch worth 15,000 Hong Kong dollars, about 2,000 US dollars. Clean, simple, no problems. But as they were leaving, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. 3 men in dark suits were following them, not security, not police. These were triad enforcers, and Marcus had seen enough movies to know what that meant. They managed to lose them in the crowded streets of the old city, ducking through night markets and doubling back through narrow alleyways. But the message was clear. The triads knew someone was cheating in their territory, and they wanted their cut. Mr. C made the call immediately. They were done in Macau. Whatever money they could have made, there wasn't worth getting disappeared into the South China Sea. They flew out the next morning. It was the first time Marcus realized that the game had limits. There were places you couldn't cheat, powers you couldn't outsmart, and consequences worse than prison. But by then, they'd stolen over $8 million worldwide, and Marcus was just getting started. By the early 90s, Marcus had gone solo. Mr. C had retired to Costa Rica with his fortune. Bobby had been caught in Atlantic City and served 18 months for fraud. The old crew had scattered, but Marcus couldn't stop. The thrill of beating the house had become an addiction stronger than any drug. He needed a new team, a better team, people he could trust absolutely. That's when fate intervened in the form of an old friend. Marcus was playing legitimate poker at the Mirage when he spotted Mark Brubaker across the room. They'd known each other years ago before the cheating started, back when Marcus was still dealing cards at the Four Queens. Brubaker was a degenerate gambler in the best sense of the term. He knew every casino in Vegas intimately. He understood odds and probabilities. He was reliably unreliable, meaning he was consistent in his recklessness, which made him predictable. Most importantly, he was desperate for money. They met for drinks that night, and Marcus laid out a vague proposition. Brubaker listened with growing interest. "I know a guy," Brubaker said when Marcus finished. "Pat Mallory. He's exactly what you're looking for." "What makes you say that?" "Because Pat is the most charismatic con man I've ever met," Brubaker said. "He could sell ice to Eskimos. He could walk into a casino with $3 and walk out looking like a high roller. And he's got balls the size of bowling balls." Marcus met Pat Mallory 3 days later at a dive bar off the Strip. Brubaker was right. Pat was in his late 30s, with the kind of rugged good looks that inspired trust. He had a natural swagger, the ability to command a room just by walking into it. He told stories that made you lean in closer. He made you want to believe him. More than that, he had something Marcus had never fully possessed, the ability to become someone else entirely. Pat could play a drunk tourist, a dot-com millionaire, a trust fund heir, or a Midwest businessman with equal conviction. He was a natural actor. Marcus explained what he was looking for, carefully, revealing just enough. Pat's eyes lit up. "When do we start?" he asked. Marcus spent 3 months training Pat and Mark in the techniques he'd perfected over nearly 20 years. They practiced in a rented warehouse, using real casino equipment Marcus had purchased through underground channels. Real roulette wheels, real chips, real tables. Pat learned the Savannah move first, the basic late betting technique. He was surprisingly good at it, his large hands moving with unexpected dexterity. But where he really excelled was in the performance aspect. When Pat sat down at a table playing drunk, he was drunk, not obviously sloppily drunk, but that perfect level of intoxication where you're confident and careless and the casino loves you because you're about to lose a lot of money. He'd slur his words just slightly. He'd laugh too loud at the dealer's jokes. He'd tip extravagantly on small wins. He'd hit on the cocktail waitress in a harmless, charming way. The dealers would relax around him. The pit bosses would see another sucker ready to be fleeced. And that's when the team would strike. Mark Brubaker, meanwhile, became their spotter and coordinator. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of Vegas casinos and an eye for detail that bordered on photographic. He could watch a pit boss for 3 minutes and tell you their shift schedule, their personality quirks, whether they were having a good day or a bad day. But Marcus knew they needed to evolve the technique itself. The old late betting method was getting harder to pull off. Surveillance technology had improved dramatically since the 70s. Digital cameras with higher resolution, better positioning, more staff reviewing footage in real time. Griffin investigations had also expanded, sharing information internationally. If you got caught in Vegas, every casino from Atlantic City to Monaco would have your face within 24 hours. They needed something new, something the casinos weren't watching for. And then one night, inspiration struck in the strangest place. It was late 1994, and Marcus was at a strip club off Paradise Road with Pat, discussing their problems. The cameras are the issue, Marcus was saying. They can zoom in now, slow down footage, catch things they missed before. Every time we make a switch after a winning bet, we're risking detection. Pat was half drunk watching the stage. So don't switch the winners. What? Don't switch the winning chips, Pat repeated, turning to look at Marcus with sudden focus despite his intoxication. Switch the losers. Marcus stared at him. That doesn't make any sense. How do you make money switching the losers? Think about it, Pat said, warming to the idea. Everyone watches the winners. Security, cameras, pit bosses. That's where the money is. So that's where they look. But nobody gives a shit about the losers. Losers touch their chips all the time. They move them around. They pick them up in frustration. They change their bets. It's normal behavior. Marcus felt something click in his mind. Keep going, he said. So what if we place big bets that look like small bets? Pat continued. Stack them so the dealer only sees the top chip. If we win, we collect legitimately. If we lose, we switch the stack down to low-value chips before the dealer can sweep them away. The dealer would have to not notice the original bet, Marcus said slowly, thinking through the mechanics. Which is why you position the chips carefully, Pat said. Put the high-value chips at the bottom, slightly further from the dealer. Put a low-value chip on top, closer to them. At a glance, all they see is the top chip, especially at a busy table when they're dealing with 10 other players and trying to keep track of everything. A dancer named Savannah walked by their table. Marcus handed her a $100 bill without thinking, his mind racing through the possibilities. It's brilliant, he said finally. If we win, there's no cheating involved at all. We just collect legitimate winnings. If we lose, we're only touching the losing chips, which looks completely normal. And anyone reviewing footage afterward would be looking for switches on winning bets, Pat finished. They'd never catch it because they'd be looking for the wrong thing. Marcus felt the familiar rush of a perfect con falling into place. We need to test this, he said. Tomorrow night, Caesar's Palace. They called it the Savannah Move, named after the dancer who'd inspired it, and it would make them legends. In 1994, Richard Marcus and his crew walked into Caesar's Palace with a simple plan. Test their new scam, the Savannah Move, using $5,000 chips. Pat, posing as a tipsy high roller, placed bets with two $1,000 chips hidden beneath a $25 chip. When he lost, he cursed and gestured in frustration, and in that split second, palmed the expensive chips and replaced them with cheap ones. The dealer swept away just $75, missing the $2,000 that had vanished. They repeated the trick 6 more times that night, mixing real wins with switched losses. By the end of the evening, they had over $90,000 and no one suspected a thing. Over the next 18 months, Marcus's team bled the Las Vegas Strip dry. They hit every major casino, Caesars, Bellagio, MGM, Wynn, often hitting 3 in a single night. The cash poured in, $100,000 one week, $200,000 the next. They had so much money they rented storage units to stash it. Marcus bought a house overlooking the Strip, Pat drove a Porsche, and Mark laundered their cash through businesses. They followed strict rules to stay invisible. Never hit the same casino twice a week, never reuse an identity more than 3 times, and never attempt a switch over $10,000. Surveillance teams found nothing. No suspicious moves, no signs of cheating. Casinos knew they were losing over $500,000 a month, but had no idea how. Then came the first close call. One July night, a sharp-eyed pit boss watched Pat closely as he made the switch. He paused, suspicious, but a radio call pulled him away, and the moment passed. The team escaped undetected, but Marcus felt a chill. The game was changing. Security was improving. They couldn't rely on small hits forever. It was time to think bigger. much bigger. That decision would lead them to the most daring and dangerous heist of Marcus's life. In early 1998, Richard Marcus learned of an exclusive high roller weekend at the Ritz, London, a private event with no betting limits where billionaires routinely lost fortunes. Through a bribed contact, he got the details and spent 6 months planning the most ambitious operation of his career. He recruited his trusted crew, rented a warehouse, and built a replica casino floor to rehearse a synchronized version of his signature scam, the Savannah move, across 5 roulette tables at once. The plan was simple: act as real high rollers, lose money deliberately, and then, at key moments, switch losing chips disguised under lower value ones. Marcus calculated that 10 well-timed switches could earn around $3 million, but he wanted more, so he raised the stakes to $50,000 chips. The higher the bets, the less attention dealers would pay to losing chips. They arrived in London with fake identities and spent days building trust by losing heavily. On the night of the event, amid chandeliers and champagne, they began. Massive bets flew across the tables. Wins were collected legitimately. Losses were quietly transformed into tiny amounts. The switches were flawless. Dealers, overwhelmed by the river of money, saw nothing. Over 6 hours, they repeated the move 10 times, walking out with $48.7 million, about $72 million, the largest single-night theft in casino history. They vanished immediately, wiring the money through offshore accounts and destroying all traces of their identities. Days later, headlines exploded. Ritz London reports record casino fraud. Scotland Yard launched an investigation. Interpol was alerted, and footage was poured over frame by frame. Marcus waited in hiding, expecting an arrest that never came. Investigators admitted sophisticated cheating had occurred but couldn't explain how or who had done it. The Savannah move remained invisible, and Richard Marcus, once a homeless dealer, had just pulled off the ultimate $72 million casino heist without ever being caught.